I just want to start by thanking Mark Bowler for joining the Display Kid podcast. I want to welcome you to kind of start, and I thought it might be a good introduction from my side if I give the audience a bit of a background on how we met. It's kind of a traditional story, but it's something that I really enjoy and have made a lot of great connections through, which is LinkedIn. And I haven't kind of told you this before, but there was a few things that were on your profile that made me kind of want to connect with you, and obviously I'm very glad that I did. And yeah, I'll let you know what those things were. First thing obviously was the obvious one, which was we both come from similar career backgrounds working within visual merchandising and visual experience. And I noticed that you'd worked for the Shalu group in Dubai. I've spent a lot of time working in Dubai also, and that was something that I was like, okay, I want to know a little bit more about this person and his experience in Dubai and what his take on it is. The other thing that really stood out to me, Mark, was on your career history on LinkedIn, you put down that you're a full-time stay-at-home dad, and having recently become a dad in the last 6.5 months, and that really stood out to me. And also the fact that you had very clearly identified that as a milestone within your career was unusual, but I think it actually said a lot about what you're like as a human. So I kind of already then knew that this must be a good guy. I kind of want to know a little bit more about him. And then the other thing which has kind of developed over time and kind of following you on LinkedIn is your kind of understanding of visual experience and visual merchandising and your ability to talk about topics that are relevant to our audience, to our niche audience. And it hasn't been a surprise to me that some of your posts recently have gone viral, and I think we'll talk about some of those posts shortly. But they were the things that stood out to me the most about you, Mark.
Oh, thanks.
So welcome.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's been an interesting, roller coaster VM, and it's been great getting to know you as well, because I have actually been following you probably longer than you've noticed me. And mostly, I think it was around the time that you started doing CX stories and some of your podcasts. But it's been a pleasure to watch the evolution and to see someone doing podcasts and getting VM out there. Like, I think we've always been this sort of silent, they call it the silent salesperson, but I kind of think of us as more as like silent ninjas who come out at
Yeah,
night, train, get really good, come out at night, make all the differences, and disappear in the morning like we've never existed. And I think, the most important thing, and this is why I wrote that post, was I think as VMs, want to become more visible, but don't know how to. And we need to get out there and we need to make sure that everyone sees us and make sure that the difference that we make in a store and to the commercial business of a retail brand is far more strategic than you think. We're creative, but we're not just making things look nice. We're like considering shopper psychology. We're thinking about what the buyers, when the deliveries are going to be. We're connected and collaborate with every single person in the business. And I think I just really it was a bit of a like the post was made out of frustration because I am currently
mm,
looking for a job. I've just moved back to Dubai. And I feel that, the image that we have needs to change. I had no idea it was going to, I mean, it's just hit 165,000 impressions, 100,000 members reached. Every day I have to pinch myself. It's mind blowing. But the consensus is the same. People want to know how we become more visible, how we get out there.
yeah,
And everyone has the same pain point. We're not just
yeah,
making things look nice, right? So
yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's just blown me away. And and then getting to meet you has been an absolute pleasure. And we've had a couple of really good chats, and I look forward to many more. So
yeah.
thanks for
We've
having
had
me.
a couple of hour-long chats that have turned into way longer than that.
Yeah.
But no, it's been amazing. So I'm gonna kind of fire in now. First question I
Hmm.
want to ask you, and you've kind of touched on it a bit here, but why is visual merchandising so important to you? Like what is it?
It's a weird thing because I landed up in visual merchandising by pure accident. I studied sports science university, and I was a swam for my country. I was a jock, basically. I played first team water polo at school, but I've always kind of done art and technical drawing and stuff when I was doing it, and I just didn't study it, and I probably should have. And I think what's really stood out to me and why I've really enjoyed it is one, there's an element of creativity, but it's really fast. So you create something exceptionally quickly. You build it, you install it, you see customers' faces going, wow. And then 3 months later, it's gone. It's in the bin and there's a whole new window inside there. And I quite like that sort of really trying, like mixing architecture, art, and product and commerciality all together to create something that really does stop customers in their feet. And then you see kids as well, their little faces. And
Mm,
when my
mm.
son was still very little, he was like 2 years old, I used to take him to the store after we'd done a big changeover, and take him to the kids section to buy him some trainers. And he would just be like, love it. Because we would put full size cartoon 3D camels in the kids section.
Yeah,
And just seeing his face would just make me like the wow on his face would just make me so happy. But yeah, I think, and then there is that added bonus of when you start looking at the commercialities and seeing sales go up and saying,
yeah,
I'll help make that happen. So not only do people look at the store and go, that's awesome, they're also like, you can see it in the black and white figures. And there's quite a lot of points where you just tick along and you're like, I feel fulfilled with what I'm doing. And I don't
yeah.
think there'd be any other job out there that would quite give me the same sort of fulfillment as visual experience, visual merchandising.
It's funny that it's so funny though, isn't it? It gives you this fulfillment, but the pace at which we work means that sometimes it's very easy to not take that moment to appreciate what you've achieved. Sometimes the pace prevents you from perhaps doing that as much as you probably need to. And then the other thing that's always baffled me is I actually came from a marketing and sports science background like yourself.
Mm.
I'm kind of used to working in, I always thought I'd end up in a profession where the answer was black and white, yes or no. And we've ended up putting ourselves in this situation, in this creative environment where there is really no right or wrong. It's really how someone perceives an environment, a situation. One person could love it, one person could hate it. It's the complete opposite to a yes and a no, black and white environment. It's crazy.
is is probably one of the most subjective
Mm,
career paths you could ever choose, where you kind of know what you want, but it's not necessarily what everyone else is going to want as well. So you like looking at the
yeah,
constant compromise to bring everyone together so that the holistic image in the end is make ticking all their boxes. And
yeah,
that's
yeah.
it's definitely a big challenge of visual experience, I think. But it's also maybe I'm a sucker for challenges, and maybe I don't like to
Mm,
have an
mm.
easy life. So I'm up for that. I'm up for that challenge. I'm up for seeing how many people can um, impress being in a subjective role. And then
Yeah,
obviously you do have the metrics and then when you know how to use them, you can literally also say, I
improve it.
made a difference. It's
Yeah.
it's it has it has its moments and it definitely has moments where you can be very frustrated and you can be
Mm, mm.
exhausted. I mean, 5, 6 nights in a row, 4 hours sleep during the day if you're lucky. And then, you're checking on contractors. Are they going to deliver on time? Do you have the right permits? Do you have health and safety measures all mapped out? Like there's just so many factors. And, we pull it off and we pull it off on a shoestring with a very, very small number of people.
Yeah,
Normally one
yeah.
of the smallest departments. And it's rewarding, I think.
It's when you spell it out like that, it still doesn't make sense why we do it. But like you said, you have to have a certain type of personality that is willing to and enjoys being in that kind of environment. But I'm going to move on. The next question I had before we kind of dive into the big questions is obviously the idea behind the Display Kid podcast was because many years ago that was kind of used as a derogatory term. Here comes a display kid that's going to make things look pretty. And the irony now is I'm kind of leaning into that phrase and using it as a brand. But what was your trigger when it comes to someone talking about the visual merchandising, or maybe you in the past. What was your version of the display kit?
It's not far off. It's when someone asks you what do you do for a living and you start to explain it and they don't get it, and the first thing they say is, "Oh, so you make stores look pretty." It really makes me tense, and especially when it's your mates as well. You know, like I don't just make somewhere look pretty. There's just so much more to it, and I'm not decorating a store with flowers and outdoor prettiness. It's like sort of this architecture. Yeah, it's a proper trade. It gets my back up, and even just talking about it now, I feel a little bit like irked. And
Yes,
I think it's taken my wife and I have been together for 15 years, and I think since I wrote that post that she truly understands what I do. 14 years of being together, she still never really understood what I do. And it's still in her mind was I would go into a store and I would move products around and make it look good. And
yeah,
then maybe it would make a sale. So yeah, it's very interesting people's perception of what visual merchandising is outside of the business. And it is, like you said, it's a trigger. And I think part of that, and maybe this is the competitive nature of me, is to prove people wrong.
yeah. It was
It's not making things pretty. There's a lot more to it. You just got to focus and
no,
listen, and you will
exactly.
see.
Yeah, it was funny. You said about friends. Like all of my friends were from. I lived in this provincial town outside of, 3 hours outside of London, where people just didn't understand, especially my friends, but even my dad, who was a veterinary surgeon, didn't understand what I did. And I think it only really dawned on him. I would be like, Dad, I'm off to Dubai this week. I'm off to Kuwait this week. I'm off to Istanbul this week, and I'm off to Amsterdam. And I think he was like, oh, people what pay you to go and do this? Like they pay you to go to fly and do this. Why don't they just get someone to do it in that place?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, they pay me to do that. And he was like, "Oh, okay." And then and I think that was when he started to maybe realize that A, I wasn't going to be a veterinary surgeon, and B, maybe I could make a living from this particular profession, and then everything was all right.
Yeah.
So yeah, the other thing I wanted to do is just really kind of go back to the beginning, Mark. We're going to focus more on some of your posts and some of the key topics in a second, but could you kind of explain a little bit about how you came from being a surfer in South Africa to merchandising women's like luxury collections in Dubai? Like this, how did that even happen?
By a
What went
complete
right or
fluke,
what went
really.
wrong?
So, South Africa is always an amazing country and it's great. And it's got a lot to offer. But when it comes to work, it doesn't really. And obviously, it has its challenges. But basically, I studied sports science. I didn't really gel with it. And I think it was probably because it was too close to the competitive swimming that I was doing at the time. And I kind of
And
stopped.
coming from that same background in a way, I absolutely didn't want to become a sports teacher. That was not something that I had any aspirations to do, and that seemed like the only route with sports science in a way.
Yeah, it was a swimming coach or
Mm.
some sort of coach or a teacher, and it just felt like it was just too much of the same. And I kind of didn't finish the degree, and I just took some time and became like a cocktail bartender, which I can tell you it was a lot of fun, especially when you're early 20s. And then a friend of mine said he was moving to London for a couple of years to earn pounds because the exchange rate was just so good. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do the same. So we jumped on the plane. I sold my car. We jumped on the plane, moved to the UK, and I didn't become the cocktail bartender I wanted, but I was working in clubs and bars. And then I got really bored of working nights, like really bored. And one of the bartenders at one of the clubs I was at, he worked at Miss 16 Energy in Carnaby Street as a
Yeah.
supervisor. So she helped me get a job there as a floor supervisor for Energy, the men's jean denim side. And
That brings back memories, Mark. Energy. Yeah, I completely forgot about that
yeah,
brand. Yeah.
Miss 60 Energy, and they had a third, like a younger girls
Was
brand for
this
teens as well.
was this like early noughties?
Early 2000s,
Yeah.
2001-ish.
Yeah, same.
But they
Yeah.
were around, they were around late 90s until 2000s. In fact, the store is, the is it Shakespeare's Head on Carnaby Street? It was opposite that. I think it's Mac now, Mac
Yeah,
Cosmetics. Um,
the one on the
and
corner.
yeah, it was super busy, right? I'd never sold clothes before. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I'd had this sort of opportunity to be a supervisor after being a manager of bars and stuff. And it was daytime work, so I was kind of enjoying it. And then I happened to serve this guy, really nice guy, kind of chilled. Didn't really seem like the energy jeans kind of guy, but anyway, I served him, and it seemed to impress him. And he came back to the store the next day and said he was the manager of the Bond Street store for Ralph Lauren. And he said, "I want you to come to Ralph Lauren." He says, "You work in commission. You're gonna smash it there. You're gonna make so much more money than you are here. It's not just a salary." I was like, "Okay." And at that point, right, I wear a t-shirt and shorts. We call them baggies in South Africa. My whole life, I live in if it's not if it's not t-shirts and shorts, I've got a pair of jeans on, and that's it. So I walked to the store to meet him for the first time, and I've never been so nervous in my life. You stand outside that store; it's massive, and you see the
It's
windows, and
grand. Yeah, it's
yeah,
amazing.
it's so expensive. You walk through,
Mm.
and you feel like you're in someone's mansion. And I was like, my heart was beating. I was really sweaty. I didn't really know what was going to happen. And he was like, "No, we're going to get you in." And then, probably the most expensive set of wardrobing I've ever had in my life. And he's like, "Okay, so this is what you're going to do." And so I started being a salesman on the shop floor there, which I'm not a salesman. I'm a bit of an introvert. Maybe this video doesn't show that because, we're talking about something I love, but it was a bit difficult for me. But what I did notice, the VM team for the first time ever, I didn't know about Bishop, I was watching them, and their job looked interesting. And
Mm.
I'm not going to say it looked glamorous because it didn't, but it looked interesting, and it looked like, we'd come in and the windows would be changed, the mannequins would be changed, the props would be
There was
changed.
an energy. There was an
Yeah.
energy in that
And I
team.
was like,
Yeah.
I want to be a part of that. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not a salesman. I want to do something
Mm.
that makes everything look different all the time. So I literally pestered who became my boss. Can I help after work? Can I come in on the weekends? And he's like, "No, no, there's nothing for you, nothing for you." And then I think we were getting closer to the sort of holiday times, right? Holiday setups. And then they did need someone. So I was working on the shop floor and working overnights, helping them out, and then going back to the shop floor the next day. And eventually he was like, "Okay, fine, we got a position, we'll get you in." But it was part of presentation. So not the sort of design and prop sourcing and styling, but more learning about capacities, stock rotation, folding, setting up the rails,
Yeah.
that sort of stuff, which was a great base.
Yeah, the foundational principles. It's
Yeah.
like you need to learn the foundational principles to be able to do any of the good stuff. You need to know
Yeah.
how to do that. You need to.
Yeah, and he was amazing, and he was like, "We're going to start here," and then, built up, and eventually I was helping him in Europe and stuff, and it's such a big company. There's a lot of people, and I just couldn't break into the other part. So I did this part for 6 years, which was
Mm.
amazing, and I got to see Milan, Paris, Belgium, New York. I got to help out with the mansion twice and open the new ladies store on Madison Avenue.
Wow.
So it was an unbelievable experience. So yeah, and then I wanted to do more. Like I wanted to learn the other sides, and I left and I went to Jack Wills for a while, which was a really different experience. I kind of threw myself in the deep end, probably before I could swim, and
Yeah.
took on everything. I was the head of VM. I had a very small team. They were very aggressive at opening stores. And it was like they wanted to beat Ralph Lauren. So I was like, okay, I can be a part of something. Again, it's the competitive nature of me. Let's try and outdo the king of preppy lifestyle. But it didn't really work out, and then moved to Dubai. But it was just always thinking, like, and seeing it, I'm like, kind of like the pace, and I like the impact that we make. And yeah, I mean, honestly, I stumbled into it, pushed a little bit, but stumbled into it. Never studied it, and learned on the go. Like my first boss at Ralph Lauren, he will always stay with me because he was
What was his name?
so Ivan Hernandez.
Mm.
Again, I guess it was similar. He started off as a cashier at Ralph Lauren in New York, and he also wanted to do a bit more and saw what the VM teams were doing, and pushed and pushed, and eventually became a VM as well. And I think he saw that and recognized it and encouraged it, and it all paid off in the end.
Do you not think, though, when going back to the early noughties, same time I got into visual merchandising after uni, it wasn't even a credible business function right then. It was just a thing. There was nothing. There was no way you could train for it. There was no way. You just had to kind of get an in and then figure it out. What I love about that time and the people that come from that time is that you could get into visual merchandising. Obviously, we both went down the degree education route, but you could get into visual merchandising from being a stock associate, from being a sales assistant. You could, if you were good, you could kind of work your way up. And all the people that I'm connected with from that era, like I love these stories and of how they started as cashiers, or same with me. My story was very similar. But now it's very different. Like now you can go to university and you can study visual merchandising. And I'm not saying, I'm not in any way saying that is a bad route to take. That I think maybe that's a route I would have taken now had that been an option.
Mm.
But I think there's something very beautiful about the time we came into it, where it really didn't have any boundaries, and you kind of just had to get an in. Like my in was like I finished university, wanted to get in. I thought I wanted to be a fashion buyer, because because I saw a poster at uni
Mm.
saying, "Do you want to be a fashion buyer?" And I remember reading it, thinking, "I want to be a fashion buyer." Then working, finishing. In order to get on a graduate scheme, then because they had graduate schemes, you couldn't get in with just a degree. You had to have a year's worth of retail experience. So I remember going to River Island and Next in my local town, handing my CV in for a part-time, like 15-hour job, sales
Mm.
assistant job. River Island happened to be the first ones to message me back. I ended up staying there, I think it was 13 years, and working my way up in the end. But I met a woman called Jenny Dempsey, who was the VM who managed the area. I got the opportunity to work with her on one visit, saw what she did, was like, wow, I didn't even know what this was. Like you said, like I
Mm.
thought I want to be part of this. Then every time she did a visit, it was, I want to work with Sam. So my manager would put me with her for the day, and it was the best day of the month. And
Yeah.
and that was my style. It's just weird. I don't know what you think, but it's get the entry point into visual merchandising now is very different. I don't even know if it's more difficult now getting into visual merchandising from a sales assistant, stock associate, if you're up against people that now have a degree in visual merchandising. I
Yeah.
really don't know.
I mean, I I think it is more difficult to come up through it, but I can tell you from my experience when I was traveling like the GCC like for the Shalhoub group are doing Ralph Lauren here. There was like AVM in Kuwait, one in Bahrain, and that was it. So you would recruit the sales team still to help certain members of the sales team that wanted to do it, that had an affinity for it. So I think it's still possible to work your way up. I mean, but I think you have to be a lot louder than we had to be to get noticed and to do it. You really need to push to be a part of the team that's going to do the changeovers. You can't be happy with just your normal 40 hours a week being a sales assistant, or
Mm.
35 hours a week being a sales assistant. You got to look at adding on up to 60, like another 30 or 25 to 30 hours a week,
Yeah.
trying to say, I want to be a VM, I'm going to be a part of it, and I'm going to learn from the ground up.
And maybe it even depends on where you're trying to be a VM, because the only time my education became an advantage was when I was trying to get a visa to move to New York to do the VP role for Michael Kors. They obviously had to build a business case that someone in the US couldn't do that job. So you have to
Hmm.
present a lot of information and stuff. That was the one time having a degree, actually, I wouldn't have got that job had I not had a degree. It's crazy, but
Yeah.
other than that, I think I could have still gone pretty far having not gone to uni.
So to be honest, I don't have the degree. And I think in the Middle East, a degree is just a piece of paper so you can travel from one place to the next to get a visa.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and I think because of my experience, the Shalhoub group found a loophole just by having a high school diploma, basically,
yeah.
or we call it a matric certificate in South Africa, where they gave submitted that, and I managed to get like a senior sales manager visa to travel to Saudi because otherwise you couldn't get in there. So
Yeah.
it does make a difference. And I think, again, like you said, it wasn't a subject at uni, visual merchandising. Now it is. And maybe I would
Mm,
have taken up this and then I would have a degree. And there's nothing stopping me from studying later and getting some sort of
mm, mm,
degree now.
mm.
But yeah, it's a very weird one. And to be honest, I think every person that's here, whether they're a sales assistant or a stockroom guy, has a degree.
Yeah, but
It used to be really weird here about that. And it's
really.
relaxing a little bit now, but everyone has to have a degree here. So it's weird.
And then I think any creative profession, whether it's, we're talking specifically about visual merchandising and visual experience, for any creative profession, you're there's a lot to be said for the University of Life and the University of Travel and Experiences,
Mm,
and that can't be taught in a textbook. Like you said, you
yeah.
probably learned so much from the even from your working in cocktail bars and the personalities that you met and
Mm.
the experiences that you had that have no direct relevance to visual experience or visual merchandising, but I'm sure some of it's in some way permeated into the person that you are now, and hence your visual merchandising.
No, travel. I mean, I've moved around a lot since I was a kid. When I was 6, we moved to the States. When I was 9, we moved from Pennsylvania to California. Then we moved to Australia for a while. I moved back to California, moved back to South Africa, and obviously I moved to the UK in my early 20s. I would say like that exposure to different cultures and different people has definitely been a part of shaping creativity. I think
Mm,
you know, different art, different, like, I mean, Australia is so different to America. And you
mm,
think about the sort of history and everything in South Africa is so different to all of them. And you learn about the sort of Zulu culture and African culture. And then, that becomes, it's in your life as you grow up. And then, you move to America and you're learning Native American culture and everything else. And again, they all had their own signature sort of art style and creativity. And I've always kind of picked up on that. And then, the indigenous people in Australia, they have their own art and then their own music. And I love music.
mm,
And that's what they're all influences. And then moving to the Middle
mm,
East, what was really interesting about you is, I was apprehensive in the beginning, but when you're here and you see, there's nothing to be apprehensive about, but it's the culture is so deep and an Emirati is so different from a Kuwaiti
mm,
and to a Bahraini and to a Saudi. And you just don't really, we're being brought up in bubbles keeps you closed. And I think creativity isn't born in a bubble; it's born to exposure. And I think getting that exposure makes a difference. And when my son's old enough, I'll be like, get on a plane, go and see the world. I had friends in South Africa that would buy those around the world tickets. Do you remember those? Like you
yeah,
buy an
yeah, yeah,
around the world plane ticket and
yeah.
travel, like around the world. I'm like, I'd be like, go and do it. Take a year out and go and do it and just see the world. I mean, we exposed him to a lot now. He's only 8, but think he's already been to 10 countries.
Wow, wow.
And I think it's going to shape him. And I think he's going to have a broader outlook on life, which is key. Sorry,
Yeah, and I think that's that.
I
And
digress.
in this no, no, in this AI world, I think that's going to be in the future AI world. I think that's going to be massively important. I'm going to get into your post topics now for the next 30 minutes or so. So I think it's fair to say you're on a mission to raise the credibility of visual merchandising as a profession. Maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit.
So, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, wrote a post just recently out of a bit of frustration because I've felt for a while and it's kind of hit a sore spot all of a sudden because I think it's because I'm looking for another role. This idea that what we were talking about it earlier is we just go and make things look nice, and that's all we understand is how to style a mannequin and put some clothes together and to make a window look pretty. But there's just so much more to what we do. There's all this collaboration we have to piece together between everyone in the office, the headquarters, right down to the guy in the stock room. So we have to coordinate all of that to do what we do. And, you know, there's so much planning and strategy to get to that point. And like you said, it's so subjective, right? So we got to make sure that we're pleasing the merchandisers, we're pleasing the CEO of the company, our general manager, the store manager, the sales assistant, the customers, the buyers. There's so many people. So we have to listen to all of them and try and piece it together. And I just felt that maybe it was because I had such great exposure at Digital Group and at Ralph Lauren, where VM is such a big part of the company, but applying for roles again, and you're being interviewed by commercial managers, guys that run the stores and think about the sales. Their impression is still to this day, we're just there to make things nice. And there's an element of kind of lowballing salaries because the competition's getting higher. The people that are studying it, we're all kind of in it. And so they're trying to bring the salaries down. And I was like, no, wait a second. This is not what we do. And a little bit of a rant. But I really tried to tone it down, and I wanted to sound positive because I do think there's a really positive spin on this. And yes, the idea is that we are as in tune with metrics as we are with aesthetics. And people need to know that we don't just whip something up willy-nilly to make it look nice and everything else. Everything we do is about increasing sales. And what was interesting about my post is I'm like, we don't just do visual merchandising as well. We might fall into it or we might study it, but when we're doing it, we start to realize that there's other parts to it that we study hard to learn outside of work, to bring into work, to elevate it a little bit further, right? There's so much competition. You always want to be, striving to stand out amongst everyone else. So yeah, I wrote it and I was like, started in product placement, learned about how to create capacities for a store so that the buyers bought the right amount of product for a store. And then from there, I realized doing it that there is no creative or visual merchandising subject at any corporation, retail business. So I started studying the commercial side. So an anecdote, here in Dubai, I was working for the Shalib Group, doing Ralph Lauren, and they had a huge succession meeting. And they put all of us in, and they were talking about if you start off as a junior buyer, and this is how you see your succession, and then everything else. And then they came to VM, and they were like, there's no succession. You're going to stay a senior visual merchandiser. And it struck a chord with me. And I don't think they were expecting this, but I put my hand up and I was like, so excuse me, but you expect us to stay here for 2 years and then learn your business?
Just a second, Mark.
No problem.
Okay, no worries. Have you got a call? All right, no worries. We're gonna stay on here, Mark. I'm gonna give you another question whilst I'm moving into another room. But I promise you, I am listening. This is real life. This is the reality of trying to film a podcast on the go.
No, that's right.
I want to ask a question, and I am going to be moving at the same time, but I am listening. I'm really interested to understand what you think it takes to be a great visual merchandiser. And maybe even give some references towards, you were talking earlier about proactively seeking information, and I think maybe giving the audience a bit of a background on how you thought to be a great visual merchandiser would be really helpful here.
Okay, I appreciate it. Good luck with the move. I think today a great visual merchandiser is someone who definitely understands how to balance retail aesthetics with commercial acumen. So what I've learned, like I said, I was talking about the Shalib Group and having nowhere to move or grow, is I realized I needed to become a bit more visible to the commercial teams. I needed to be able to start doing something that they understood. And then so what I started doing is enrolling myself in all their commercial, courses that were offered by the Shalib Group. So I was doing leadership training. I was doing change management. I was learning about Excel, and because it was available, it was free, right? So I thought I'm going to learn all of that. And then while I'm learning that, I'm sitting in these training sessions with GMs, store managers, all these guys that have a succession plan, buyers and the merchants. I'm sitting in there with them learning. And they started to see me and they're like, this is not where we see visual merchandisers, basically.
This is not normal.
No, and I'm like, well, you will see more of me in these. So when it came to walkthroughs, and they start flipping through their spreadsheets, I've got my own. I've printed my own out, and I'm like, yeah, the sales are like this, and they're like, so what do you think made the difference? And I'd be like, well, what we found is this sort of area of the store is like a hotspot. So you basically building, your heat maps, and it was kind of like starting to blow them away. And I started getting invited to the CEO walkthroughs and being part of those meetings because I wasn't just talking aesthetics anymore. I was talking a language that they all understood. So I think a, a really good visual merchandiser is creative and can do amazing things with product and with sets and understanding materials and everything else. But I think the next level, and this is where I think we're all going to get greater exposure. And my post is really showing that is people want to know what metrics they can use to prove their viability. Also, they also want to know how to become more visible. And I think I know we work nights and I know that it's very, very difficult, but it's stay those extra couple of hours and do that walkthrough with a cup of coffee and your eyes half masked and be involved in that and tell people what you've done. Because if you're not there to do that, there are other people that will take some of the credit. And you just gotta be there, get the exposure, learn a part of the business. And I think maybe in the university courses for visual merchandising, they're probably teaching it. But if you are a seasoned VM and you've always thought it was the aesthetics, it's time to look at where you're working and seeing what they offer. And then if it comes down to technical things like graphic design and the rest of it, you're probably going to have to do that on your own. Just do it, but layer it up with some of the commerciality programs that are
I think that
available.
I think the biggest lesson that I've taken away from this part of the conversation, and I totally agree with, is if you want to be truly great, then you have to take it upon yourself to seek out the information that's going to give you the edge. Like, that isn't going to be handed to you. You've got to find that, and you've got to learn it, and you've got to test it. You've got to put yourself in those environments where they feel risky and they feel scary, but that's what's going to give you the edge.
Yeah, stepping out of your comfort zone is the only way you're going to learn.
Mm.
You just got to always think like, okay, I've got that now. It's time packed. What else can I do to be uncomfortable and learn more, right? And that's where you grow. You don't grow sitting still. And you grow by make life challenge yourself and challenge life, and you grow. So yeah, stick your neck out a little bit. And I think the key thing is the more we as visual experience experts do this, the more integrated into the business we are. And also when it comes down to restructuring, we'll be less likely on the chopping block. And I think that's, for me is really important because I've experienced it a couple of times now and it's frustrating. So every time, like it's happened a couple of times, and neither moments in life that I could crumble and say, is this for me? Or, what I try and do is I see an opportunity and I take advantage of it. So like for this instance, I am not a person who writes things. I'm a person who does visuals. I can sit on my computer and play on SketchUp hours every day. There was something in me that said, at this opportunity, I need to write a post about visual merchandising and how key we are to the commerciality of the business. I did it. And oh my gosh, I can't believe it's just been so popular. And I learned so much about myself by doing that. And I think I know that whenever I go next, it'll stay with me to be a part of me, and it's just going to make things even better. My recommendation is stick your neck out, do something that's uncomfortable. Yes, you got into the business because you like being creative, but that there is another part to it that's going to help you grow and help you keep your job, basically. So do it, get out, be
Love that,
uncomfortable.
Mark. One of the conversations we had offline before, which I was wondering if you can talk about, I want to get into the metrics now, is you talked about on one of your posts the concept of visual merchandising as a cost center versus a return on investment driver. Can you explain what those two things are and then what you mean by that, please?
Yeah, one of the challenges that I had a few years ago was convincing my line manager that visual merchandising wasn't a cost center. We weren't. A lot of people see VM as a cost center because we build and design sets that go in the windows in stores and then they disappear and they go off. Now, it's easy to sit there and say that's all we do, but what we need to change the mindset on that is it's a return on investment. So there are matrices out there. There's literally, it's called return on investment matrix, where you work out the cost of what you installed versus the total number of sales. And then it goes on a little bit further in my our post, I broke it down and even added in an example. But you can literally prove that by the number of people that walk into a store and the uplift of sales, that you've created a return on investment. It's there, and how I've found these metrics is I spent time with the buyers and they're always looking at ROI. So, and then obviously your line managers or CEOs will be looking at ROI on building a new store and opening it. So these metrics has existed. It's just a matter of speaking to the right people to find it. And, again, footfall, dwell time, all these things are available to us. We just never really think about it. Like the operations managers are always counting the number of people who walk into the store. Now, one of the first metrics I used was footfall, was basically the week before a changeover, see what that is. The week during a changeover, for some reason, always goes up because people like to see a slightly messy store. Customers are attracted to it. They think what's new, what's happening, and they come in. So you can have a little bit of an increase. And then the key one is the week after, it'll lull a little bit because now it's new and your repeat customers are coming in and they're trying to see the lay of the land. And in the second week, it starts to go up again. My suggestion is on a basic level for if you're a first time VM, find those figures and you're going to start proving that you get a return on investment. As you grow and you spend more time in the bigger meetings, you can start learning about the other matrices like ROI, and it's there. It's there for the taking. We just need to put it in our presentations. We need to add them to our KPIs. When you're doing your annual assessments and you go into it and you're like, I've got these figures in black and white. I know every time I did a change over the stores, the footfall went up. Oh my gosh, this person isn't just making the store look pretty. He knows how about bringing the sales in. He knows about moving products around and how to create a heat map to see where the sales are coming from and make sure that he's making an impact. Just do it. It's there. And I put in 7. And number 7 for me is one of the most important, but it's not quantitative, it's qualitative, is being in touch with the sales teams, the frontliners.
Yeah, please
Asking for their
explain it.
input.
Please explain this more, because I think the idea of being great in visual merchandising is that ability to understand what a quantitative measure is, what a qualitative measure is, and being able to combine the two. I think that's something that is very much a USP of what we can bring to the table in these board meetings, as a really clear point of view. Can you give a bit more color on this idea of quantitative versus qualitative?
Yeah, so quantitative will definitely speak to your CFO. Qualitative will speak to almost everyone else. So, and it's blending the two together. So you've got your quantitative, which is your footfall or your ROI, and it's black and white. It's easy to see. And sometimes the increases can be small and sometimes they can be big. But the one thing that can always really shine a light on it is the information and feedback you get from the sales staff. Now, the sales staff are connected to the customers. And often, if a customer is really unhappy or really happy, they'll feed that back to you. So speak to them and ask them like you've just done this change. What's the feedback? What's your feedback as well? So, I mean, a sales assistant would be the first person to tell you if they like it or don't like it. If they feel you're making their life difficult or easy, and then they will also share feedback from customers because they spend so much time with them. They also get emailed by customers. If they get positive and it's a link to where the store looks, ask them to share that with you. Take it. You know, you can add attachments onto a lot of these online, annual assessments that you go, add them in there. Like, yes, here's my, maybe the footfall wasn't 25% up, maybe it was 10%, but the impact on our regular customers was this, and this is what they had to say about what they felt the store was like. It balances out. Do it. We're not in the business of, only looking at black and white. We're in the business of wowing customers and making them feel special. So get that input from them and put it into your assessments. And I can tell you, no one will first time you do it, and if you've only got 1 or 2, people will be wow. The next time you do it, the sales systems will start to feed more feedback to you because you've put it out there, and you'll come back with 10, and then the people will be even more. And then what happens is, as a VM, when people start to talk to you in a meeting, you've got all this information, and you can just talk freely and positively, and people will be enamored with what you're saying and hooked onto it because you've got the metrics and you got what people are saying. You've married the two together, and it'll be awesome. So don't think that just because your metrics might not be showing that you've had a massive impact, that you're not having a massive impact on people themselves. And that's important. So to get it, the smile will put on your face when you get a sales system sends you an email from a customer that they've received from a customer saying that they've never seen something and felt something so amazing as walk into your store that day. You'll never lose that grin for the whole year. It'll be there forever. And it'll make him even more elated than seeing 25% uplift on footfall. I can tell you that.
I love that, Mark. I love that. I want to ask you another question, and that I think is really important now is when you're looking towards your next role and you're sure in your behaviors and your values and what you're looking for. What are you looking for in the next role? What are the things that are going to be important to you to be in place for the next role?
I would say that one of the things that really struck with me more in recent years is working with people and inspiring them. So learning to lead with empathy as a creative has been really rewarding. My previous role, I went in very, very different role because a team had gone through a restructure. Team of creatives that had gone through a restructure. They were deflated. They were a little unhappy. And the role wasn't about necessarily going in and being creative and inspiring them. It was about listening to them, finding out what they want and what they feel is missing, and then helping them get exposed. And that for me was amazing. So now for me, what I want is that ability to take my experience as a visual merchandiser and take what I've learned recently about being a leader and marrying the two together and inspiring a team to create wow and to gain exposure. I think like having that really, really made me very like probably happier than I have been in a very long time was to see a team that had never ever presented their work to the senior leadership team stand up and do it. I mean, I was choked, and it is like a proud daddy moment when I'm their leader.
It says a lot about you.
Thanks. And I think that's what I want. I want to not necessarily make a change to a business, but I do want to change how they perceive visual experience. But I want to take people that have the same passion in the role that I have and see them grow. And I think that's what I want.
I think that's a great way of ending it, Mark. I think that's amazing, and I think I can completely relate to that. It's you're in this for much bigger purpose than your own progression. You're interested in elevating this profession to what it should be, and I think that's something really special. I want to thank you for joining me. I'm going to be in Dubai soon, and I want to do a proper sit down interview rather than having to do a conversation with me where I'm being moved from room to room. So I appreciate your understanding on that. Thank you, Mark. It's been a great
Yeah,
conversation.
that's great. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Thank you.